Chapter 5 of The Human Machine by Arnold Bennett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. Habit Forming by Concentration. As soon as the will has got the upper hand of the brain, as soon as it can say to the brain with a fair certainty of being obeyed, "Do this," think along these lines, and continue to do so without wandering until I give you leave to stop. Then is the time arrived when the perfecting of the human machine may be undertaken in a large and comprehensive spirit, as a city council undertakes the purification and reconstruction of a city. The tremendous possibilities of an obedient brain will be perceived immediately we begin to reflect upon what we mean by our character. Now, a person's character is, and can be, nothing else but the total result of his habits of thought. A person is benevolent because he habitually thinks benevolently. A person is idle because his thoughts dwell habitually on the instant pleasures of idleness. It is true that everybody is born with certain predispositions, and that these predispositions influence very strongly the early formation of habits of thought. But the fact remains that the character is built by long-continued habits of thought. If the mature edifice of character usually shows in an exaggerated form the peculiarities of the original predisposition, this merely indicates a probability that the slow erection of the edifice has proceeded at haphazard, and that reason has not presided over it. A child may be born with a tendency to bent shoulders. If nothing is done, if, on the contrary, he becomes a clerk and abhors gymnastics, his shoulders will develop an excessive roundness entirely through habit. Whereas if his will, guided by his reason, had compelled the formation of a corrective physical habit, his shoulders might have been, if not quite straight, nearly so. Thus a physical habit, the same with a mental habit. The more closely we examine the development of original predispositions, the more clearly we shall see that this development is not inevitable, is not a process which works itself out independently according to mysterious, ruthless laws which we cannot understand. For instance, the effect of an original predisposition may be destroyed by an accidental shock. A young man with an inherited tendency to alcohol may develop into a stern teetotaler through the shock caused by seeing his drunken father strike his mother. Whereas if his father had chanced to be affectionate in drink, the son might have ended in the gutter. No ruthless law here. It is notorious also that natures are sometimes completely changed in their development by chance momentary contact with natures stronger than themselves. "From that day I resolved," etc. You know the phrase. Often the resolve is not kept, but often it is kept. A spark has inflamed the will. The burning will has tyrannized over the brain. New habits have been formed, and the result looks just like a miracle. Now, if these great transformations can be brought about by accident, cannot similar transformations be brought about by a reasonable design? At any rate, if one starts to bring them about, one starts with the assurance that transformations are not impossible, since they have occurred. One starts also in the full knowledge of the influence of habit on life. Take any one of your own habits, mental or physical. You will be able to recall the time when that habit did not exist, or if it did exist, it was scarcely perceptible. And you will discover that nearly all your habits have been formed unconsciously by daily repetitions which bore no relation to a general plan, and which you practised not noticing. You will be compelled to admit that your character, as it is today, is a structure that has been built almost without the aid of an architect, higgledy-piggledy, anyhow. But occasionally the architect did step in and design something. Here and there among your habits you will find one that you consciously and of deliberate purpose initiated and persevered with, doubtless owing to some happy influence. What is the difference between that conscious habit and the unconscious habits? None whatever as regards its effect on the sum of your character. It may be the strongest of all your habits. The only quality that differentiates it from the others is that it has a definite object, most likely a good object, and that it wholly or partially fulfils that object. There is not a man who reads these lines but has, in this detail or that, proved in himself that the will, forcing the brain to repeat the same action again and again, can modify the shape of his character as a sculptor modifies the shape of damp clay. But if a grown man's character is developing from day to day, as it is, if 9/10 of the development is due to unconscious action and 1/10 to conscious action, and if the 1/10 conscious is the most satisfactory part of the total result, why, in the name of common sense, henceforward should not 9/10 instead of 1/10 be due to conscious action? What is there to prevent this agreeable consummation? There is nothing whatever to prevent it, except insubordination on the part of the brain. And insubordination of the brain can be cured, as I have previously shown. When I see men unhappy and inefficient in the craft of living from sheer crass inattention to their own development, when I see misshapen men building up businesses and empires and never stopping to build up themselves, when I see dreary men expending precisely the same energy on teaching a dog to walk on its hind legs as would brighten the whole colour of their own lives, I feel as if I wanted to give up the ghost, so ridiculous, so fatuous does the spectacle seem. But, of course, I do not give up the ghost. The paroxysm passes. Only I really must cry out, "Can't you see what you're missing? Can't you see that you're missing the most interesting thing on earth, far more interesting than businesses, empires, and dogs? Doesn't it strike you how clumsy and short-sighted you are, working always with an inferior machine when you might have a smooth gliding perfection? Doesn't it strike you how badly you are treating yourself? Listen, you confirmed grumbler, you who make the evening meal hideous with complaints against destiny, for it is you I will single out. Are you aware what people are saying about you behind your back? They are saying that you render yourself and your family miserable by the habit which has grown on you of always grumbling. Surely it isn't as bad as that, you protest. Yes, it is just as bad as that. You say, the fact is, I know it's absurd to grumble, but I'm like that. I've tried to stop it and I can't. How have you tried to stop it? Well, I've made up my mind several times to fight against it, but I never succeed. This is strictly between ourselves. I don't usually admit that I'm a grumbler. Considering that you grumble for about an hour and a half every day of your life, it was sanguine, my dear sir, to expect to cure such a habit by means of a solitary intention, formed at intervals in the brain and then forgotten. No, you must do more than that. If you will daily fix your brain firmly for half an hour on the truth, you know it to be a truth, that grumbling is absurd and futile, your brain will henceforward begin to form a habit in that direction. It will begin to be moulded to the idea that grumbling is absurd and futile. In odd moments, when it isn't thinking of anything in particular, it will suddenly remember that grumbling is absurd and futile. When you sit down to the meal and open your mouth to say, "I can't think what my ass of a partner means by," it will remember that grumbling is absurd and futile, and will alter the arrangement of your throat, teeth, and tongue, so that you will say, "What fine weather we're having!" In brief, It will remember involuntarily, by a new habit. All who look into their experience will admit that the failure to replace old habits by new ones is due to the fact that at the critical moment the brain does not remember, it simply forgets. The practice of concentration will cure that. All depends on regular concentration. This grumbling is an instance, though chosen not quite at hazard. End of chapter 5.